everyone! How are you holding up in quarantine these days? I feel like I'm slowly going crazy here, so I find myself thinking more and more about subjects to talk about in the meantime. And that's when I realized I haven't done a job video in a long time, or a predictions video, so I thought, what the heck, and combine them both. Now, I'm aware that 5.3 hasn't come out just yet, so this is actually just more of a fun video to do about the predictions I have for the next expansion of 6.0, and what jobs I think could be waiting for us next. Since we already got the long-awaited Dark Knight from Heavensward, the Blue Mage, the Red Mage, and the Samurai in Stormblood, and Dancer from Shadowbringers, I couldn't help but wonder, what else could we possibly be missing? Well, at this point, it's not really expected for Final Fantasy XIV to be giving us new job hints just now, but it is expected for them to be giving us new jobs with every expansion, so without at least one new job, one can't help but feel cheated. So I think we're overdue for some wild speculation for the next set of jobs that's going to be coming for us next. What kind of jobs do you think that 6.0 will be, and what roles will they fill? Now, first of all, I should mention that it has been stated by the dev team before that after all the problems, complications, and the stress levels that came from releasing the 3 jobs from Heavensward, they decided never again to release 3 jobs at once again. Which is pretty fair if you ask me, I'm alright with that. So the most that we can be expecting with an expansion are 2 jobs, and perhaps a 3rd one much later on, much like how they did with the Blue Mage at the end of Stormblood. So please remember that these ideas aren't based on any real facts, these are just my own best guesses, possibly my own wish list to what could be waiting for us in future expansions. Feel free to take what you can from here and have your own speculations, and please feel free to comment down below what you think about my ideas. Alright, so I have come up with a job for each section, just so that we have it all covered. So for the current timeline that we have now, we have 4 tanks, 4 melee, 3 healers, 3 ranged, and 3 magical. Or 4 if you really want to count Blue Mage. Otherwise, it's 3 magical and 1 limited job, which is how I personally see it. So we have a pretty wide selection so far. These are my best guesses, wishes, hopes, whatever you want to call them, and we will be naming just the classic jobs that we know from previous Final Fantasy games. My logical choices for the next expansion will be adding another ranged and a healer so that we're kind of all evened out. Again, only if you count Blue Mage as a magical range instead of limited, and I won't be against that. But I would be all for a brand new healing job, but Yoshi P has mentioned that they all want balanced jobs, and healer can be pretty difficult to balance out with the healing and DPS. So here are my best guesses for the next job coming out in 6.0, which again is probably about a year away from us. So we will start off with my personal guess for the tank, which will be simply known as the Knight. Personally, I doubt we will be getting a new tanking job right now, especially with the release of Gunbreaker and the Dark Knight acting as kind of the main job for Shadowbringers, but stranger things have happened. Now, my first job for a new tank was actually the Berserker. But to be honest, when you think about the Berserker, I mean, in all of its appearances, they wear animal furs, they have bones and horns mixed into their outfits, and they are known especially for using the attack known as Berserk. I personally don't think we'll ever be getting a Berserker class, especially since we already have the Warrior class, which is probably the closest that we could get to a Berserker if you ask me. It's a Berserker in everything but name. I mean, it even has a skill called Berserk. But then again, if they do add a Berserker job, they could get pretty creative with that, and, well, players do enjoy having the classics in. I do think that probably a good fit would be a Knight. Originally that was updated from the Warrior, and often they have the ability to cover allies from damage, and in later games with higher emphasis on abilities, this class kinda seemed to fade away, replaced with specialty classes like the Soldier and the Paladin. So I'm thinking that it might actually be a good chance to maybe reimagine it. Since we already have swords with the Paladin and the Red Mage, I'm thinking maybe something along the lines of using twin blades, maybe like a 2-ended blade like Serdon from Final Fantasy IX. If I have to be honest though, I think the main reason that I'm even suggesting the Knight is because I want us to kind of earn the title of like a Knight of Ishgard. Maybe like find out another form of the Knight that came from even before the Dragon Song War and is slowly making a comeback in the land of Ishgard. I know, it's very unlikely, but hey, there aren't too many jobs to be up for the running when it comes to the tank, and in all honesty, I don't think we need any real excuses to go back to Ishgard. Alright, so the next job we're going to be moving on to is the healing job. My best guess for that is going to be the Chemist. So after doing some research, I did find a poll online asking fans about what kind of jobs they would like to see in the future for Final Fantasy XIV, and the clear winner was actually the Chemist, and there are actually several reasons for this. It is possible that this job could be part of a Thanovarian battle medic or something similar, since we have heard so much of Thanavar. But we haven't really had a chance to see this land yet or get any more real information about it. I mean, if we aren't going to Thanar in 6.0, and I wouldn't be surprised if turns out that doesn't happen, it could be set up so that if we ever do go there in the future, it would be something to consider. It would also be our very first non-casting healer, which has been requested, and it would be giving us something very new. Now, chemists usually show up mixing all various types of items for big effects, especially when it comes to healing and dealing damage. Of course, the obvious problem here is that pretty much no one wants to have a job that's reliant on buying a ton of potions or items just to be effective in combat. That would certainly be worked around with certain abilities, but it raises the question on why your job is a chemist when it's not like actually using items. So it also raises questions about the mechanical identity. So it could be either a healer or ranged damage dealing with some plausibility. Also, I do think that in light of the poison for the Black Rose, I wouldn't be surprised if Chemist actually shows up at some point in the storyline to help combat against it, just on the off chance that the Black Rose isn't gone completely. Moving on to the DPS, we will be discussing my best guesses for both the range, magical, and the melee, just so we cover all of our basics. First up will be the range DPS, and we have for that suggestion to be the Puppet Master. I know that it's a bit out there because we really don't see the Puppet Master that often in these games, but since we already have 2 pet jobs, 3 if you count Machinists, which I really don't, but I do think that they can make it work. We do know that in this game we have mammoths running everywhere, and if you look back to Final Fantasy XI, we're first introduced to the job when we visit a region that is very similar to the Near East, which is kind of like how I imagine places like Thanar to be. So once again, in case we ever do go to Thanar, or at least someplace close to it, this would fit in very well. Anyway, this was just a fun idea I came up with, and where we could be having a job that could be commanding different puppets on the field and have them do a little bit of everything. I kind of see them as kind of like a bard and summoner mix, or maybe more like a support job where the mammoths or the puppets that we bring out can give your teammates a boost or increase their stats. Anyway, it's certainly worth looking into. Now this next job is actually suggested for the magical DPS job, and it's probably the most likely of the jobs that we have on this list because it has been confirmed that it exists in the world of Final Fantasy XIV, the Geomancer. Now, for those of you who haven't done the Astrologian job quests, we do see the art of Geomancy mostly in the Far East. They're able to read the wind, water, and be able to predict events and even manipulate them to a certain degree. Geomancers have a kind of pedigree in the world of Final Fantasies, and they are generally seen to be more of a healing job, but in this world we've actually seen some insight into elemental magic and can be used as special bell-like weapons or wands in battle. One could argue that since we already have a job that controls elements, or rather we have 2 in the forms of both the black magic and the white magic, it could be changed around to make it a very unique role in this game. Geomancers do draw their powers from nature, and we can have a kind of melee healer with a kind of 1-2-3 rotation, kind of like the monk I suppose, that can create healing spells perfect for a Geomancer's job. Besides, I guess I always wanted a Shinto-style caster that has ruins and maybe talismans to kind of control buffs and debuffs. I'm putting Geomancer on this list mostly because not only does it seem possible, it seems almost likely that it's going to be coming along sooner or later. Despite how close it does seem to other jobs we already have, again, they could change the lore. Like, for example, we could make it so that when we're introduced to our teacher, they could be looking into a kind of new form of geomancy, trying to find different ways to manipulate the flow of ether or the elements around us and come up with a special system just for the geomancer. I personally would be very excited about that, and I think a lot of other people would too. And now for our final job for the DPS, for the melee, would be the Rune Knight, also known as a Templar, I suppose. Now, Rune Knights are those that use blades with kind of a magical edge to them. Now, I know what you're thinking, we already have the Red Mage for that, and you're right. But I'm thinking we can actually use a hammer instead, and can have it so that we can imprint runes when it strikes. Just a fun idea. Also, this is just one of those little jobs that does have little hints and clues, like kind of sprinkled here and there throughout the previous expansions. For example, when you're running through the dungeon of Castrum Albina, the Dragoon gear is actually labeled as the Rune Fencer's gear. So this is a concept that is certainly possible, and another bit of dialogue is actually from Hoary Boulder, where he mentions that he has learned special sword techniques when he was at Razet Han, which kind of sounds like a hint to a future job, kind of like how people were predicting that Alize would be a Red Mage. Besides, if we are going to go to the Near East one day, which I'm pretty sure we will, I'm not sure we will be doing that for 6.0, it's definitely something to consider though. And anyway, the Rune Knight does kind of have a Near Eastern feel to it, which is a really nice addition if we do go to the Near East one day. And I would also love the idea if they did change things around so that instead of using like a magical sword or something like that, we use the hammer. A fun fact about the hammer, it was first designed with Gaia, and when Gaia was first drawn for the Eating quest, like very early on in development, the one who first drew her, they added the hammer in, not really thinking about the fact that there wasn't a giant hammer wielding job in the game already. I know that has nothing to do with the Rune Knight, I just wanted to add that part in. Now, normally I would end things there, but I actually have one more job out there, and I'm just adding this one in because I felt it did deserve to be talked about. I think that the Beastmaster will be our new limited job. Now, Square Enix did state that the Blue Mage was the first limited job in the game, so that stands to reason that it will not be the last. I do think the Beastmaster, also known as a tamer or a trainer job, could be a good candidate for future limited jobs. As their name suggests, this is a job where you're able to either capture monsters and turn them against their enemies, or train them to use in future battles. Think of them as more of a rough and tumble version of a Pokemon trainer. Now, these effects were seen as very powerful in past games, but oftentimes the monsters that you captured have a limit before they're released, so you have to go hunting out for new ones. In Final Fantasy X-2, the Tamer Dresssphere gave the three heroines the power to summon just one specific animal each, but they could learn multiple moves and attacks against their foes. But I think that the best example of the Beastmaster came from Final Fantasy XI, where the Beastmaster job could charm almost any enemy and can be recruited later as an ally. In 14, we already have the Scholar and the Summoner who can summon pets onto the battlefield, so it's certainly possible that we could add the Beastmaster in eventually. Why would I think it'd be a good choice for a limited job though? Well, to be able to use the Blue Mage, one needs to go out and fight specific monsters to learn abilities. So I do think that if we were to go out and hunt specific beasts to tame, this could be a good way to do it. So the way I see it, we have two options. We can actually have a single pet and have them learn a bunch of abilities, and we can have them trained to attack how we see fit, which would be a good way to do it. Or we can gain control over a large number of endgame monsters that can be recruited, trained, and then used like in a very specific kind of battle. Something along the lines of the Blue Mage classes where we have that special arena, the Mass Carnival, and we can actually pit them against other Beastmasters and just maybe have some kind of form of entertainment like how the Mass Carnival is. And only for the Beastmaster. This will require a lot of time into exploring and training, which not only fits the journey to training bees, but it's a really good way to have a unique limited job. Alright everyone, so those are my best guesses for the future jobs for 6.0 and onwards. I know that these are just my guesses, my personal hopes of what we could be seeing for the game. Hopefully we may see one of them again someday, because it does feel like we're running short on job ideas at this point. I do know that we could be seeing something very unique later on though. Like, I mean, if I really had to make a bet on what kind of jobs we would be getting for the future, at least one classic job from the Final Fantasy series that we would very easily recognize, and maybe the second job would be a brand new one that is entirely new to Final Fantasy, which would be amazing to see in any case. Anyway, I hope you all enjoyed this video on my thoughts of what could be waiting for us in the future. And if you have any guesses or suggestions, please let me know down below. I would love to hear them. Now, while I was making this video, again, I am well aware that 5.3 has not been released just yet. It has been postponed because of the whole coronavirus, and I know that we have a very long way to go before we even reach 6.0. We have at least a year, and 5.3 should be wrapping up the main storyline for Shadowbringers. But as it has been shown in previous expansions, around patch 5.4 and onwards, like the remaining patches for the expansion, we do kind of get clues on what kind of jobs we could be getting for the future, and well, it's never too early to speculate if you ask me. Besides, I haven't done a job video in a while, and it just crossed my mind to do something fun while we're waiting for our quarantine to end, which hopefully will be very soon. I'll probably end up just doing another job prediction video as we get closer to the end, but this is just what I think for now. Anyway, thank you all for watching. This is going to be Claire signing out. I hope you all have a good rest of your day and try not to go crazy while stuck in quarantine.